The old familiar ache in my chest wasn't from a bad heart, it was from a broken one. It had been nearly a year since I'd last seen my son, Michael. A year since the day he looked me in the eye, his jaw clenched, and spat those words at me like venom. "Dad, we don't need you." The echo of them still haunted my quiet apartment in the heart of Boston. The city hummed with life outside my window, a stark contrast to the silence that had become my companion. I was 62 now, a retired carpenter with hands that still remembered the feel of wood grain and the satisfying weight of a hammer. I'd built my life on hard work, on providing, on being the rock my family could always lean on. But rocks can be moved, and sometimes they just crumble. My phone, a relic of a simpler time, buzzed on the coffee table. It was my ex-wife, Sarah. We'd been divorced for 10 years, but we still talked. Our shared grief over Michael's stubbornness was a fragile bridge between us. "He's having a birthday party for little Leo next weekend," she said, her voice soft and tentative. "He didn't invite you." A familiar stab of pain. Leo was my grandson, a bright-eyed 6-year-old with my crooked smile. I'd missed his first 2 birthdays. The ache in my chest tightened. "I know," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "He's made that clear." "Maybe you could just show up," she suggested, almost a whisper. "He can't exactly kick you out in front of everyone." I sighed, running a hand over my tired face. The thought of it, of crashing a party where I wasn't wanted, felt like a violation. It was the same reason I hadn't fought back when Michael had thrown me out. I was a man of quiet dignity, not one for public scenes. "I can't, Sarah," I said. "He's made his decision. I have to respect it, even if it breaks my heart." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. Sarah knew as well as I did that Michael's resentment wasn't just about the money. Not anymore. It was about a misunderstanding that had festered into a deep, ugly wound. It had started 2 years ago. Michael and his wife Clara were struggling. Michael had lost his job at a tech startup, and Clara's freelance graphic design work wasn't bringing in enough to cover their mortgage. I offered to help, not with a handout, but with a loan. A substantial one, enough to cover their expenses for a year and give them time to get back on their feet. Michael, always too proud, had bristled at the idea. He saw it as a charity, a sign of his failure. But Clara, ever the pragmatist, had convinced him to accept. We drew up a simple agreement, no legal jargon, just my word against theirs. They would pay me back when they could. For a few months, things were good. Michael found a new job, a stable one at a local firm, and Clara's business began to pick up. They were starting to talk about repaying the loan. Then, I made a mistake, a big one. My younger brother, Tom, had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. He was my only sibling, my best friend. The medical bills were piling up, threatening to bankrupt him and his family. I had to do something, so I told Michael and Clara not to worry about the loan anymore. I told them to consider it a gift. That's when everything fell apart. Michael flew into a rage. He saw it as a move to control him, a gesture of pity. He accused me of treating him like a charity case, of not respecting his ability to stand on his own 2 feet. He didn't see the love, the sacrifice. He just saw a father trying to buy his way back into his life. The argument escalated, becoming a shouting match that ended with him throwing me out of his house. "We don't need you, Dad," he had roared, his face red with fury. "We never did. We're doing just fine without your pity money." I remember the look in Clara's eyes as she watched it all unfold. She was a quiet woman, with a kindness that seemed to radiate from her. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of helplessness and sorrow. She tried to intervene, but Michael's anger was a tidal wave. I didn't blame her. She was caught in the middle. I left that day and never looked back. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew my presence would only cause more pain. My love for my son was a fierce, protective thing. I would rather be a ghost in his life than a constant source of his anger. The week before Leo's birthday party was a blur of lonely routines. I went to the same coffee shop, read the same newspapers, and walked the same paths in the park, all while the city buzzed around me. The thought of my grandson's party, of the laughter and the cake and the family pictures I wouldn't be in, was a constant, dull throb. On the day of the party, I couldn't bring myself to stay home. I took my old Ford F-150 and drove, aimlessly, down the coast. The salty air and the rhythmic crash of the waves were a soothing balm on my raw nerves. I found myself in a small, sleepy seaside town, pulling into a diner parking lot. Inside, the place smelled of coffee and fried onions. The world outside, with all its hurts and angers, felt a million miles away. I sat at the counter, a cup of black coffee steaming in front of me, and watched the lives of strangers unfold. A young couple giggling over a shared plate of pancakes. An old fisherman, his face a road map of wrinkles, nursing a cup of tea. It was a simple, normal scene, the kind of scene I used to be a part of. My phone rang. It was Sarah again. "It's a disaster," she said, her voice tight with panic. "Clara called me. Michael got into a huge fight with one of his cousins. He lost it. He yelled at everyone, and now he's holed up in the bedroom and no one knows what to do." A cold dread washed over me. I wanted to be there for him, to knock some sense into him, but I knew I couldn't. My presence would only make it worse. "What about Leo?" I asked, my heart pounding. "He's crying. He doesn't understand why his dad is so angry. Clara is trying to calm him down, but she's just at her wit's end." I told Sarah I was sorry, that there was nothing I could do. I hung up the phone and stared at my reflection in the dark, greasy glass of the diner window. The old man looking back at me was a stranger, a ghost. He had built his life on being a provider, a protector, and now he was neither. The bell on the diner door chimed, and a familiar figure walked in. It was Clara, my daughter-in-law, my son's wife. She looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed and her shoulders slumped. She scanned the diner and her eyes met mine. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the room. Her expression was a mix of shock and something else I couldn't name. Relief? Desperation? She walked over to my stool, her movement slow and deliberate, and slid onto the one beside me. She didn't say anything, just ordered a glass of water. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said, her voice a low murmur, barely audible over the clatter of plates. I just shrugged. "I had to get away," I said, my voice heavy. "I heard about what happened." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "He ruined it," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He ruined his son's birthday. Again." The silence stretched between us, filled with the unspoken weight of all our shared pain. I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but I didn't. "It wasn't my place. I don't know what to do," she finally said, looking at me, her eyes pleading. "He's so angry, all the time. I don't recognize him anymore." My heart ached for her. She was a good woman, a kind woman, and she was caught in the crossfire of a war that had nothing to do with her. I looked at her, at the quiet desperation in her eyes, and a decision, a reckless, dangerous decision, formed in my mind. A decision that had the potential to mend things or to break them beyond repair. I knew I had to do something. For her, for my grandson, for the family that was slowly tearing itself apart. "There's something I need to show you, Clara," I said, my voice firm. "It's a long drive. Are you willing to come with me?" She looked at me, a flicker of hope in her eyes. A woman drowning and grabbing onto the first life raft she saw. "Yes," she said without a moment's hesitation. "Yes, I am." The old F-150's engine rumbled to life, a familiar, comforting sound that had been a constant in my life for decades. Clara sat silently in the passenger seat, the window reflecting the worried crease in her brow. The city lights of the small coastal town faded behind us, replaced by the dark winding roads of rural Massachusetts. The air, once thick with the smell of the ocean, was now crisp and smelled of pine and damp earth. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice a fragile whisper in the darkness. "To a place that I haven't been to in years," I said, keeping my eyes on the road. "A place that tells a story I should have told Michael a long time ago." I could feel her gaze on me, filled with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. She didn't press for more details. She trusted me, in a way my own son no longer did. The thought was a painful one, but it was also a source of strange comfort. We drove for nearly 2 hours, the headlights cutting a swathe through the inky blackness. The rain began to fall, a soft, steady patter on the windshield that seemed to mirror the quiet rhythm of our breathing. I turned on the old radio, and a classic rock station filled the cab with the familiar sound of the Eagles. "Desperado," the song was called. The irony wasn't lost on me. I pulled off the main highway and onto a narrow gravel road, the tires crunching loudly. The trees on either side of us grew thicker, their branches forming a dark canopy overhead. Up ahead, a small weathered sign was barely visible in the glow of the headlights. It read, "Oak Haven, Est 1928. Clara leaned forward, her eyes wide. "What is this place?" "This is where I grew up," I said, a wave of nostalgia washing over me. "The town my father built, literally." I pulled into a small clearing and turned off the engine. The only sound was the drumming of the rain and the soft drip of water from the leaves above. In the distance, a few scattered lights of a small town blinked in the darkness. "I want to show you the house I grew up in," I said, reaching for a flashlight. She hesitated. "Michael would be furious if he knew I was here with you." "Michael doesn't need to know," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "This isn't about him. Not right now. It's about a truth he's never been willing to hear." She nodded, and we got out of the truck, the rain instantly soaking our clothes. We walked down a muddy path, the beam of the flashlight dancing ahead of us. We rounded a bend, and there it was. A small two-story house, its white paint peeling and its front porch sagging. The lights were out and the place looked abandoned. "My dad built this house with his own hands," I said, my voice a low rumble. "He was a carpenter just like me. He moved here with my mom in the 50s right after the war. He had nothing but a toolbox and a dream." I gestured to the surrounding land. "He bought this plot of land with the last of his savings. People told him he was crazy. They said the soil was too rocky, that no one would ever want to live here. But he saw something they didn't. He saw a community." I pointed the flashlight to a small shed behind the house. That's where he started. Just a shed. He worked day and night, building furniture, small things at first. Then he got a contract to build a few houses for some of the local farmers. One house became two, two became five, and before long, he had a small construction business. He didn't just build houses, Clara. He built this town. I could see the story unfolding in her eyes. The house, the land, the old shed, they were more than just objects. They were a testament to a life built on grit and determination. "He was a proud man," I continued, my voice thick with emotion. "He never took a handout. He worked for every penny, every nail, every plank of wood. When he was sick at the end of his life, my brother Tom and I wanted to help. We wanted to pay for his medical bills. He wouldn't hear of it. He said he would face his final days with the same dignity he'd lived his life with. He said the greatest gift we could give him was to live our own lives with the same pride and self-reliance." The rain was coming down harder now, but neither of us moved. The silence between us was filled with the weight of my father's legacy. "My dad was my hero," I said, my voice breaking. "He taught me everything I know, but he also taught me that sometimes a man's pride can be a burden, a heavy one." I turned and looked at Clara, my eyes meeting hers in the dim light of the flashlight. "When Michael accused me of trying to buy his love, of treating him like a charity case, he was speaking from a place of his own pride, the same kind of pride my father had. But he didn't know the whole story. He didn't know that I was trying to do something for him that my father wouldn't let me do for him. I was trying to give him a gift of freedom from debt, of a fresh start, a gift I couldn't give my own father." A tear slid down Clara's cheek, mingling with the rain on her face. She reached out and took my hand, her touch warm and comforting. "He doesn't understand, does he?" she whispered. "He thinks you gave up on him. He thinks you just walked away." "I didn't walk away," I said, my voice hoarse. "I gave him space, the only thing I could do. He needed to find his own way, to stand on his own 2 feet, just like my father taught me." I felt a sense of relief, of a burden I had carried for a year finally being lifted. I had told my story, I had shared the truth, and in the quiet understanding of my daughter-in-law's touch, I found a small measure of peace. "We need to go back," she said, her voice stronger now. "Leo needs me. And Michael needs me to understand." I squeezed her hand. "You understand more than you think," I said. "And sometimes, understanding is the most powerful gift of all." As we walked back to the truck, the rain had begun to ease. The rhythm of our footsteps on the gravel path was a steady beat, a new rhythm for a new path, a path that, for the first time in a long time, didn't feel so lonely. I had come here to show her a story, but in telling it, I had found a small piece of my own story that I had been missing, the piece that had been lost in the silence, in the anger, in the pain, the piece that was, finally, beginning to heal. The drive back to Boston was quiet, but the silence was different now. It was a comfortable one, filled with an unspoken understanding. The rain had stopped, and the moon, a sliver of silver, peeked through the clouds. Clara was no longer staring out the window with that haunted look. Her shoulders were relaxed, and she seemed to be lost in thought. When we pulled up to her house, the lights were still on. The silence of the neighborhood was broken by the sound of a distant ambulance siren. My stomach tightened. "Was everything okay?" "Thank you," she said, turning to face me. Her eyes, though still tired, held a newfound clarity. "Thank you for showing me that. It makes so much sense now." "You're a good woman, Clara," I said, the words feeling inadequate. "You deserve better than to be caught in the middle of this." She shook her head. "He's my husband, and he's a good man, under all that anger. He's a lot like you, more than he knows." A small smile played on my lips. "I guess we all are in some way." She opened the car door, but then hesitated. "I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to tell him what you showed me." A knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. "Are you sure that's a good idea? It might make things worse." "It can't get any worse," she said, her voice firm. "He needs to know the truth. He needs to know why you did what you did, and he needs to know that you never gave up on him." I watched her walk to the front door, a small, determined figure in the porch light. She didn't look back. I wanted to stay, to wait for a sign that everything would be okay, but I knew I couldn't. My part was over. The rest was up to them. I drove home, the streets of Boston now bustling with the late-night traffic. The city, which had felt so isolating just a few hours ago, now felt like a place of possibility. I had risked everything tonight, my son's anger, my daughter-in-law's trust, but I had done it for the right reasons. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of purpose. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. It was Sarah. "He knows," she said, her voice a mix of awe and relief. "Clara told him everything. About your father, about Tom, about the whole story. She said he didn't say anything at first. He just sat there, listening. And then he cried." The words were a hammer blow to my heart. Michael, the man who had always been so proud, so stoic, so angry, had cried. It was a raw, unfiltered emotion that I hadn't seen in him since he was a boy. "He cried, and he said he was sorry," Sarah continued, her voice trembling. "He said he was so ashamed that he had been so blind. He said he had been fighting so hard to be his own man that he had lost sight of the fact that he already was. He said he wanted to see you." The world around me seemed to stop. The sun streamed through my window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The silence of my apartment, once so heavy, was now filled with the sound of my own thumping heart. "He wants to see me?" I asked, the words a rough whisper. "Yes," Sarah said, her voice full of joy. "He wants to see you. He wants to apologize. He wants his dad back." I hung up the phone, my hand shaking. I felt a surge of emotions, relief, joy, and a deep, profound sadness for all the lost time, for the missed birthdays, the unspoken words, the broken connection. But the sadness was a temporary thing, a shadow cast by the bright light of hope. I knew what I had to do. I had to go to him, not as a ghost, not as a source of anger, but as a father who had waited patiently, who had loved unconditionally, and who had never, ever given up. I got in my truck and drove. The same path I had taken the night before, only now it felt different. The air was clear, the sun was shining, and the world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for a reunion that was a year in the making. I pulled into their driveway, my heart pounding in my chest. I saw him standing on the porch, a small, fragile figure standing beside him. Leo, my grandson, the boy with my crooked smile. Michael's face was a mixture of emotions, shame, relief, and a deep, bone-weary sadness. His eyes were red-rimmed, and his jaw, once so clenched, was now slack with a fragile vulnerability. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, at the old truck, at the man who had been a ghost for so long. I walked up the porch steps, my feet feeling heavy, my heart feeling light. I looked at Leo, and the boy's eyes, so full of innocent wonder, seemed to be asking a question. Who was this old man, and why was he here? "Leo," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm your grandfather." The boy looked at me, and a small, hopeful smile appeared on his face. "Grandpa?" he asked, the word a precious gift. I looked at Michael, and he finally spoke. His voice was a low, broken rumble. "Dad, I'm so sorry." The words, so simple, so powerful, were all I needed. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I just opened my arms, and he walked into them. A grown man, a father himself, crying on my shoulder. In that moment, all the pain, all the anger, all the unspoken words of the past year melted away. The weight of my broken heart, which had been so heavy for so long, was finally, mercifully, lifted. Clara came out onto the porch, a small, grateful smile on her face. She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw not just gratitude but something more. A deep, profound respect, a respect that was earned, not given, a respect that I knew in that moment was worth more than 1,000 words. My son was back, my family was back, and the ghost of the man I had been was at long last gone. The following days were a delicate dance of rediscovery. Michael and I spent hours in his garage, surrounded by his tools and projects, talking. Not about the past, not about the money, but about the future. He showed me the intricate woodworking projects he'd been working on, a passion he had inherited from me, but had kept hidden. I showed him old blueprints of my father's early houses, sketches from a time when a man's worth was measured by the strength of his hands and the integrity of his work. Leo, my grandson, was a constant, joyous presence. He would bring me his toy trucks and ask me to fix them, his small, serious face a mirror of my own from so many years ago. I taught him how to hold a hammer, how to feel the grain of the wood, how to build something from nothing. It was a legacy, a connection, a bridge between 3 generations that had been so close to collapsing. Clara was a quiet observer, her presence a calming balm. She would bring us coffee, a small, knowing smile on her face. She saw the change in Michael, the softening of his shoulders, the light that had returned to his eyes. She knew that the angry, closed-off man she had been living with was slowly, finally, fading away. One afternoon, as Michael and I were sanding a bookshelf he was building, he paused and looked at me. The garage was filled with the sweet, dusty smell of sawdust, a scent that felt like home. "I was so stupid, Dad," he said, his voice low. "I was so focused on proving to you that I didn't need you, that I didn't realize how much I wanted you." I put down my sandpaper and looked at him. "It's okay, son," I said. "Pride is a heavy weight. We all have to learn how to put it down." He nodded, a tear welling up in his eye. "Clara saved me. She showed me what I was doing to myself, to our family. She told me about your father, about the house, about the real reason you gave up the loan. I was so wrapped up in my own anger that I couldn't see the truth. I couldn't see the love. The words were a gift, a healing balm on a wound that had been festering for so long. I didn't need an apology. I just needed to know that he understood." We talked for hours about his fears, his insecurities, his struggles to be the kind of father and husband he wanted to be. He told me about the pressure he felt at work, the financial stress, the constant fear of not being good enough. I listened, my heart aching with a profound love for this man, my son who was finally letting down his guard. I shared my own struggles, my own fears, the loneliness of my retirement, the feeling of being irrelevant, the ache of a life that felt like it was winding down. We were 2 men, a father and a son, finally seeing each other, finally understanding each other. That evening, Clara came into the garage, her face a mixture of concern and relief. "You 2 have been out here for hours," she said, her voice soft. "Dinner's ready. Leo wants to show you his new drawing, Dad." Michael smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that I hadn't seen in a year. "We're coming," he said, and for the first time in a long time, the words sounded like a promise. We walked into the house and the smell of roasting chicken and potatoes filled the air. Leo was sitting at the kitchen table, a box of crayons and a drawing in front of him. He looked up, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Grandpa, look," he said, his voice full of excitement. He held up a piece of paper with a wobbly, colorful drawing of 3 stick figures. One was tall and broad-shouldered, with a hammer in his hand. The other was a little smaller, with a mop of brown hair. And the third was a tiny figure with a huge, smiling face. "That's you, Grandpa," he said, pointing to the tall figure. "And that's Daddy, and that's me." A lump formed in my throat. It was a simple drawing, but it was a world of meaning. It was a family, whole and unbroken. Clara stood beside the table, her hand resting on Michael's shoulder. Their eyes met mine, and in that silent exchange, I saw the truth. This was my family. This was my home. And it was Clara, in her quiet strength and her profound kindness, who had brought me back to it. As we sat down to dinner, the conversation flowed easily. Laughter filled the room, a sound that had been absent for so long. I looked around the table at my son, his face now peaceful and content, at my daughter-in-law, her eyes filled with a quiet joy, at my grandson, his small, crooked smile a reflection of my own. I knew in that moment that I had walked away from my son not because I had given up on him, but because I had trusted him. I had trusted that he would find his own way, that he would see the truth, and that he would, eventually, come back. And in the process, I had found a way back to myself. And Clara, she was more than a daughter-in-law. She was a partner in my journey, a quiet force who had, with one phone call and one long, rainy drive, done more to heal my family than I ever could have imagined. I owed her a debt of gratitude that I knew I could never fully repay, a debt that was not about money, but about something far more precious: family. Weeks turned into months, and the wounds began to heal, leaving behind fragile new scar tissue. My routine shifted. Instead of lonely walks in the park, I now had Sunday dinners at Michael and Clara's house. I'd show up early, a bag of groceries in hand, and the house would fill with the smells of my mother's old recipes, a silent homage to the man who had built a town with his own hands. The relationship with Michael was no longer a strained, polite one. It was a partnership. We worked on his projects, a small business idea he had for custom furniture. He was finding his footing, his confidence growing with every piece he finished. I was his sounding board, his second pair of hands, and his biggest fan. It was a role I had always wanted, a role I had never been able to have before. Clara and I developed our own rhythm. She was a woman of few words, but her actions spoke volumes. She would leave a fresh cup of coffee on the workbench for me in the mornings, and she'd smile at me with a warmth that was both comforting and new. She would ask for my advice on design ideas for their home, and we'd spend hours poring over color swatches and fabric samples. She saw me not just as Michael's father, but as a person, a partner, a friend. The quiet moments between us were the most powerful. One afternoon, while Michael was on a work call, Clara and I were in the kitchen. The sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. She was washing dishes and I was drying. It was a simple domestic scene, one that I hadn't been a part of in a long time. "He's happy, you know," she said, her voice a low murmur. "Happier than I've seen him in years. He talks about you all the time now. It's like he's finally found his place." I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "I'm happy too, Clara. More than you know." She turned and looked at me, her hands still in the soapy water. Her eyes, usually so full of quiet strength, were now filled with a different emotion, a deep, profound gratitude that felt dangerously close to something else, something I couldn't name. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "That night, when I saw you in the diner, I felt so lost, so alone." I reached out and took her hands, my calloused fingers brushing against her soft, warm skin. "You were never alone, Clara. You just didn't know it." We stood there for a moment, the silence between us filled with the weight of our shared journey. My heart pounded in my chest, a rhythm that was both familiar and new. The air between us was charged, a silent current of unspoken emotions. That's when Michael walked into the kitchen. The moment broke. Clara quickly pulled her hands away, her face flushing slightly. Michael didn't seem to notice. He was a new man, a man so engrossed in his own happiness that he didn't see the silent electric tension in the room. The thought, the dangerous, forbidden thought, had taken root in my mind. It was a betrayal of my son, of my family, of everything I believed in. But it was there, a dark, pulsing undercurrent beneath the surface of my joy. I was falling in love with my daughter-in-law. The realization was a punch to the gut. I was a 62-year-old man, a man who had lost his family once and was now on the precipice of losing it again, this time by my own hand. Clara was my son's wife, the mother of my grandson. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. I started to pull back, to create distance. I would arrive later for Sunday dinners and I would leave earlier. I would focus on my work with Michael, making sure our conversations were about nothing but wood and nails and blueprints. I would avoid being alone with Clara, our quiet moments in the kitchen now feeling like a minefield. She noticed. Her silent questions were in the lingering looks, the slight frown on her face when I didn't accept her coffee, the way she would start to say something and then stop, her words caught in her throat. The dynamic between us, once so easy and comfortable, was now strained, filled with a tension that I alone was responsible for. One evening, as I was leaving, Michael walked me out to my truck. The cool night air felt like a relief on my skin. "You've been a little distant lately, Dad," he said, his voice laced with concern. "Is everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Just tired, son. It takes a lot to keep up with you and that boy of yours." He laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "Don't say that. We need you here. We need you more than you know." The words were a dagger to my heart. He needed me. And I was on the verge of betraying his trust in the most profound way. I got in my truck and drove away, the headlights illuminating the dark, familiar streets of Boston. I was back where I started, in a sense. Alone. But this time, the loneliness was of my own making. I had risked everything to get my family back, and now I was risking it all again, for a feeling that was forbidden, a desire that was a betrayal. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't stay. My presence, which had once been a source of healing, was now a source of danger. I had to walk away again, but this time I knew the stakes were higher, the hurt would be deeper, and the silence, once a heavy companion, would be a crushing weight, filled with the ghost of a love that was never meant to be. The decision was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I couldn't stay. I couldn't risk the newfound peace I had with Michael, the fragile bridge we had built. And I certainly couldn't risk the unspoken, dangerous connection I felt with Clara. I was a carpenter, a man who built things, not a man who tore them down. I stopped going to their house. My excuses were vague and simple. I was tired. I had a project of my own to work on. I was catching a cold. Michael's phone calls, at first frequent and concerned, became less so. The silence grew, and with it, a familiar ache in my chest. This time, it was a self-inflicted wound. One afternoon my phone rang. It was Clara. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat. I almost didn't answer it, but the image of her face, the quiet desperation in her eyes that night in the diner, flashed in my mind. I answered. "You've been gone for 2 weeks," she said, her voice low and direct. "Michael is worried. Leo is asking for you, and I need to see you. We need to talk." I hesitated. "Clara, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm busy." "Don't lie to me," she said, her voice firm, no longer a quiet murmur. "You're not busy, you're running away, and you're not just running away from us. You're running away from yourself." Her words hit me like a physical blow. She knew. She saw through my carefully constructed walls, my flimsy excuses. She saw the truth I was so desperately trying to hide. "Meet me," she said, her voice softer now. "Just for coffee, at the diner where we met." I agreed. The word a small, desperate whisper. I couldn't deny her. I couldn't deny the truth that she was holding up to me like a mirror. The diner was the same smell of coffee and fried onions, the same quiet rhythm of strangers' lives. But this time, the atmosphere was different. It was charged with a silent, nervous energy. She was already there, sitting in the same booth we had sat in before. She looked tired, a few new lines etched around her eyes. But her gaze was steady, her resolve unwavering. "Why did you leave?" she asked, no preamble, no small talk. I sighed, running a hand over my tired face. "You know why, Clara, it's not right." "What's not right?" she asked, leaning forward. "That you and I finally have a connection? That you and Michael have found a way to be a family again? What are you so afraid of?" "I'm afraid of a betrayal," I said, my voice rough. "I'm afraid of a love that isn't mine to have. You're my son's wife, Clara. You're the mother of my grandson. This is wrong." She was silent for a long moment, her eyes never leaving mine. "Did you ever think, just for a moment, that what we have isn't about that? Did you ever think it's about friendship, about respect, about two people who found a way to heal each other in a broken family?" Her words were a lifeline, a different perspective that I had been too blind to see. I had been so consumed by my own guilt, my own forbidden feelings, that I had misread the entire situation. I had projected my own desires onto her, onto our friendship. "I was so lost, you know," she continued, her voice a fragile whisper. "Michael was so angry, so closed off. It was like I was living with a stranger. And then you came back. You brought light back into his life. You brought a father back to his son. You saved my family." A tear slid down her cheek. "And in a way, you saved me too. You showed me that I wasn't alone in this. You showed me that there was a person, a good man who understood what I was going through, who saw me, really saw me." My own eyes were welling up now, a tight knot in my throat. I had been a fool a proud, scared fool. I had misinterpreted her gratitude, her respect, her deep affection as something more, something dangerous. "I'm so sorry, Clara," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I thought—" She reached across the table and took my hand, her touch warm and reassuring. "I know what you thought, and it's okay. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm just asking you to be in our lives, to be a father, a grandfather, a friend." The weight on my chest, which had been so heavy, was finally mercifully lifted. The knot in my stomach unraveled. The air in the diner, which had felt so thick and tense, was now clean and clear. I looked at her, at the beautiful, strong woman who had seen through my pride, my fear, my shame. And in her eyes I saw not a forbidden love, but a deep, profound respect, a love that was pure and true, the love of a family. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice a whisper. She smiled, a small, radiant smile that lit up her entire face. "We go home, old man. Our family is waiting for you." I got up, and we walked out of the diner and into the cool evening air. The city lights of Boston shimmered in the distance, a welcoming beacon. I felt like a different man. The weight was gone. The fear was gone. And in its place was a renewed sense of purpose, a renewed sense of hope. I had come to this diner to run away from a ghost of a forbidden love. But I was leaving with a truth that was more precious than any love. I was leaving with my family whole and unbroken. And for the first time in a long time I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The drive back to Michael and Clara's house was a different kind of quiet. Not the tense, strained silence of our previous drives, but a comfortable, easy one, filled with the unspoken understanding of two people who had just navigated a complex emotional landscape and emerged on the other side. The air in the truck cab was no longer heavy with my guilt. It was light with a renewed sense of hope. I pulled into the driveway, and the sight of their house, with its porch light on and a warm glow emanating from the windows, felt like a homecoming. It wasn't just a house, it was a sanctuary. We walked up the front path, and as Clara reached for the doorknob, she paused and looked at me. "Ready?" she asked, a small, knowing smile on her face. I nodded, my heart full, ready. The front door opened, and the sounds of a family filled the air. Michael was on the couch watching a basketball game, his shoulders relaxed. Leo was on the floor, surrounded by his toy cars, his small face a picture of pure concentration. He looked up, and his eyes, so full of innocent wonder, lit up. "Grandpa!" he shouted, dropping his cars and running to me, his small arms wrapping around my legs. I bent down and picked him up, his weight a solid, comforting presence in my arms. "Hey, slugger," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Michael looked up, a look of surprise and relief on his face. "Dad? Clara? Where have you two been?" Clara walked into the living room, a quiet, serene smile on her face. "We just went for a drive," she said, her voice calm. "We had a lot to talk about." He looked from her to me, a flicker of concern in his eyes. He didn't press. He trusted us. He trusted the process. The trust, once so broken, was now a solid foundation. The rest of the evening was a blur of simple domestic bliss. We ate dinner, talked about our week, and laughed at Leo's endless stream of jokes. It was the kind of evening that I had once taken for granted, and now it felt like a precious gift. I knew in that moment that I had been wrong to walk away again. My place wasn't on the outside looking in. My place was here, in the middle of it all, in the heart of my family. The next morning I woke up to a new sense of purpose. I had a lot of work to do, not just on Michael's furniture business, but on myself. I had to learn how to be a grandfather, a father, and a friend again. I had to learn how to be present, to be open, to be vulnerable. I got in my truck and drove to their house. When I arrived, Michael was already in the garage, a piece of wood in a vise, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up when I walked in, a small smile playing on his lips. "I was wondering if you were going to show up," he said, his voice easy. "You're not getting rid of me that easily, son," I said, and a comfortable silence settled between us as we got to work. The following weeks were a testament to the power of forgiveness and the resilience of a family. The furniture business, a quiet side project at first, began to take off. Michael's craftsmanship, a skill he had inherited from me, was exceptional. He was creating beautiful, timeless pieces, and people were taking notice. The work was a new language for us, a way to communicate without words. We would stand side by side, our hands covered in sawdust, talking about life, about love, about the mistakes we had made, and the lessons we had learned. One afternoon, as we were loading a finished bookshelf into my truck for a delivery, Michael paused and looked at me. "You know, Dad," he said, his voice a low rumble, "when you gave me that money, I saw it as a handout. I saw it as a sign of my failure. I was so wrapped up in my own pride that I couldn't see the love. But now I see it. It wasn't just money. It was a lifeline. It was a way for you to tell me that you believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself." The words were a hammer blow to my heart, a painful but necessary truth. He had finally, completely understood. "I always believed in you, son," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I never stopped, and I never will." We stood there for a moment, two men, a father and a son, bound not by blood alone but by a shared history of pain and a renewed sense of purpose. The sun was setting, casting a warm, orange glow over the garage. It was a picture of peace, of healing, of a new beginning. And Clara, she was the quiet force behind it all. She had seen the truth, and she had had the courage to tell it. She had risked everything to save her family, to bring a father back to his son. And in doing so, she had become a part of my story, a part of my family, in a way that was more profound than blood or marriage. She was the one who had made my broken heart whole again. And in that quiet, unspoken understanding, I knew that I loved her, not with a forbidden, dangerous love, but with a deep, profound respect, the love of a family, a love that was true. And so, my story, which had started with a broken heart and a painful walk away, had come full circle. It was a story of a father and a son, a story of a family, and a story of a woman who had, in her quiet strength, changed everything. It was a story that was just beginning. The rhythm of our lives settled into a comfortable, easy flow. The small furniture business, a partnership between Michael and me, was flourishing. Our pieces, crafted with a meticulous attention to detail and a timeless design, were in high demand. We were a good team, our individual strengths complementing each other perfectly. Michael with his keen eye for design and his business acumen, and me with my decades of experience and my steady, practiced hands. Our conversations were no longer just about work. They were about everything. He would talk to me about his fears, his hopes, his dreams for Leo and Clara. I would share stories about my life, about my father, about the lessons I had learned along the way. We were building more than just furniture. We were building a relationship, a bridge between two men who had been estranged for so long. Clara was our quiet cheerleader. She managed the business's social media, her artistic touch giving our brand a unique and appealing identity. She would bring us coffee in the garage, her presence a calming balm on our busy days. Her quiet, steady strength was the foundation upon which our family and our business was built. One Saturday morning, as we were working on a large dining table, Michael's phone rang. It was Sarah. He answered, his face a mixture of concern and resignation. He listened for a moment, and then a look of profound sadness washed over his face. "What is it?" I asked, my heart pounding. He hung up the phone, his hand trembling slightly. "It's Tom," he said, his voice a broken whisper. "My Uncle Tom. He's not doing well. The cancer, it's gotten worse. Sarah said the doctors don't think he has much time left. My brother, my best friend, the man whose medical bills had been the catalyst for this whole mess. The news was a punch to the gut. All the anger, the pain, the misunderstanding that had separated my son and me for so long had its roots in my love for my brother, and now that love was facing its final painful act. I felt a wave of emotions, grief, sadness, and a deep, profound gratitude for the time I had with Michael, for the fact that we had found our way back to each other. "I need to go to him," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "I need to be there for him." "We'll go with you," Michael said, his voice firm. "We'll all go." The word "we" was a precious gift. It meant family. It meant that I wasn't alone. We packed up the truck and made the long drive to Tom's house in the countryside. The familiar roads, once a lonely path for me, were now a shared journey. Clara sat in the passenger seat, her hand resting on my arm, a silent source of comfort. Michael sat in the back with Leo, the two of them quiet and contemplative. The mood in the truck was somber, but it was also filled with a deep, profound love. When we arrived, Sarah was waiting for us on the front porch, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. She hugged me tightly, and for a moment we were just two people, sharing a grief that was both personal and profound. Tom was in his bedroom, his face gaunt, his body frail. But his eyes, my brother's eyes, were still bright with a fierce, unwavering spirit. He smiled when he saw me, a genuine, joyful smile. "Look what the cat dragged in," he said, his voice a raspy whisper. "You're not getting rid of me that easily, old man," I said, a tear rolling down my cheek. Michael walked into the room, and for a moment the two men, uncle and nephew, just looked at each other. Michael's face was filled with a profound sorrow. He hadn't seen his uncle since the day I had given him the money for the first time. The man he was looking at was a shadow of the man he had once known. "Uncle Tom," Michael said, his voice a low, choked whisper. "Hey, kid," Tom said, his voice full of warmth. "I'm glad you're here." Clara and Leo stayed in the living room, giving the three of us our space. We sat around Tom's bed for hours, talking, laughing, and sharing memories. Tom was a storyteller, and he told us stories about our childhood, about our father, about the crazy things we used to do. He talked about his own life, about his wife and kids, about the legacy he wanted to leave behind. It was a beautiful, heartbreaking conversation. And in the middle of it all, Tom turned to me, his eyes shining with a deep, profound love. "Thank you, brother," he said, his voice barely audible, "for everything, for your love, for your sacrifice, for the man you've always been." I choked back a sob. "You don't have to thank me, Tom. You're my brother." He smiled, a tired, peaceful smile. "I know, and I'm so glad that you and Michael found your way back to each other. That's all I ever wanted, for my family to be whole again." That night, as I sat beside my brother, holding his hand, I realized something. All the pain, all the anger, all the unspoken words of the past year had led me here, to this moment, to a place where my family was, finally, whole again. It was a painful journey, but it was a journey worth taking, because in the end, it was not about money, or pride, or anger. It was about love, a love that was stronger than anything that could ever try to break it. And in that quiet, peaceful room, I knew that my brother was finally at peace. Tom's passing was a quiet, dignified affair, much like the man himself. The funeral was small, a gathering of family and close friends who had all been touched by his kind heart and unwavering spirit. I delivered the eulogy, my voice thick with emotion as I shared stories of our childhood, of a bond that was stronger than blood. Michael stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder, a silent gesture of support. The aftermath of the funeral was a time of quiet reflection. We stayed at Tom's house for a few days, a place that now felt like a repository of memories, both joyful and sad. We cleaned out his workshop, a place filled with the tools he had used to build his life. We found old pictures, letters, and mementos that brought a smile to our faces and a tear to our eyes. One afternoon, as I was going through a box of old papers, I found an envelope. It was addressed to me in Tom's familiar, scrawling handwriting. I opened it, my hands trembling. Inside was a single piece of paper, a letter he had written just a few days before he passed. "My dearest brother," it began, "if you are reading this, I am in a better place. Don't be sad for me. I lived a good life, a full life, a life filled with the love of a good family. I have no regrets." My eyes blurred with tears. I continued to read, my heart aching with every word. "I know that what happened between you and Michael was my fault. I know that your gift, your sacrifice was a testament to your love for me. But I was a proud man, just like our father. I couldn't accept it. I wanted to fight my own battles, face my own demons. I was so focused on my own pride that I couldn't see the love, the profound sacrifice that you were making for me. I am so sorry, brother." A sob escaped my lips. He had understood. He had seen the truth. "I want you to know something. A secret I've been keeping for a long time," the letter continued. "The money you gave me for my medical bills, I never used it. I knew that you and Michael were fighting. I knew that the money was a source of pain, a source of conflict. I knew that I couldn't accept it, not if it meant you would lose your son. So I gave it to Sarah, your ex-wife. I asked her to keep it. I told her that one day, when the time was right, she should give it back to you and tell you to give it to Michael. Not as a loan, not as a gift, but as a testament to your love, a love that was always there, even when you couldn't see it." I was stunned. The money, the thing that had caused so much pain, so much conflict, was still there, waiting, a symbol of a love that was stronger than any misunderstanding, any anger, any pride. I looked up, my eyes meeting Michael's. He was holding a photograph of a younger me and Tom, laughing, our arms around each other. He saw the tears in my eyes, the letter in my hand. "What is it, Dad?" he asked, his voice full of concern. I handed him the letter. He read it, his face a mask of disbelief. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and profound gratitude. He knew, Michael said, his voice a whisper. He knew that it was about more than the money. He knew that it was about us. He did all of this for us. The tears were flowing freely now. The three of us, Michael, Clara, and I, were a small huddled group in the middle of a house that was no longer just a place of mourning, but a place of healing. Clara, in her quiet way, went to the phone and called Sarah. She explained everything. A few minutes later, Sarah's car pulled into the driveway. She walked in, a small worn satchel in her hand. "I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner," she said, her voice a mix of guilt and relief. "Tom made me promise. He said I had to wait for the right moment, the moment when you and Michael were ready to hear the truth." She handed me the satchel. It was heavy. I opened it, and inside, wrapped in a faded cloth, were stacks of money. The exact amount I had given to Michael 2 years ago. The money which had once been a source of such great pain was now a symbol of a love that had never wavered. I looked at Michael, at my son, his face a mixture of emotions. He reached out and took the satchel from my hands. He didn't say anything, he didn't need to. He just held it, the weight of it a physical reminder of a love that had endured. "We're going to give this to Tom's family," he said, his voice firm. "This is a gift from him. It's his legacy, his way of saying thank you." I smiled, a genuine, joyful smile. My son had not only understood the truth, he had embraced it. He had taken the pain and the misunderstanding of the past and had transformed it into a gift of his own. He was a good man, a man I was proud to call my son. The rest of the day was a beautiful blur of quiet acts of kindness. We gave the money to Tom's wife, a woman who was in desperate need of it. We spent time with his kids, sharing stories about their father, ensuring that his memory would live on. And in the middle of it all, I looked at Clara, at the woman who had brought me back to my family, and I knew that I was the luckiest man in the world. I had lost my brother, but I had gained my family. And in that quiet, peaceful house, I knew that my journey was finally complete. The revelation of Tom's letter was a pivotal moment, a turning point that brought an even deeper layer of peace and understanding to our family. The money, now a gift to Tom's family, became a symbol of love, not conflict. It was a tangible testament to the quiet strength of my brother, and it was a source of profound healing for all of us. Life, as it always does, continued on. The small furniture business, now infused with a renewed sense of purpose, grew steadily. Michael and I were a well-oiled machine, our days filled with the satisfying hum of saws and the scent of freshly cut wood. Our work was more than a business. It was a form of therapy, a silent language that allowed us to communicate without words, to build a future that was stronger than the past. Clara, in her role as our creative director, was a force to be reckoned with. Her designs were innovative and beautiful, and her social media presence drew in a steady stream of new customers. She was a quiet leader, a woman whose intelligence and creativity were matched only by her profound kindness. One evening, after a particularly long day in the workshop, Clara brought me a cold beer. I was sitting on a porch swing, my hands tired, but my heart full. Michael was inside, giving Leo a bath, and the sounds of their laughter floated out to me, a warm, comforting soundtrack. She sat beside me, the swing creaking softly. The moon, a bright disk in the night sky, cast a pale glow over the backyard. "You know, you've changed so much," she said, her voice a soft murmur. "You're so peaceful now." I smiled, a small, genuine smile. "I guess I finally put down the baggage, Clara. It's amazing what a little truth and a lot of family can do." She nodded, a knowing smile on her face. "You've given him so much, you know. Not just the business. You've given him back his confidence. You've given him back his peace." "He gave me so much more," I said, my voice low and sincere. "He gave me my life back, and so did you." The air between us was charged, but this time it wasn't with a forbidden love. It was with a deep, profound respect, a gratitude that was a language of its own. "I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't seen you in that diner that night," she said, her voice a whisper. I was so lost, so hopeless. I reached out and took her hand, my calloused fingers brushing against her soft skin. "You were never hopeless, Clara. You're the strongest person I know. You had the courage to tell the truth, to fight for your family, to do what was right even when it was hard." Her eyes in the pale moonlight were filled with tears. I didn't want to see my family fall apart. I saw what was happening to Michael, and I knew I had to do something. You were the only person who could help. "I didn't do anything, Clara," I said, my voice firm. "You did it all. You were the catalyst. You were the one who had the courage to fight for your family, to fight for your love." The silence that followed was a comfortable one, filled with the unspoken words of two people who had been through so much and had emerged on the other side, stronger and more whole. We sat there for a long time, the only sound the soft creak of the swing and the distant sound of Michael and Leo's laughter. I knew in that moment that our relationship was something unique and precious. It was a bond that was born out of pain and forged in the fire of shared experience. It was a love that was not romantic, but was deeper and more profound than any love I had ever known. It was the love of a family, a love that was pure and true. The next morning I drove home, a peaceful quiet settling over me. The city of Boston, which had once felt so isolating, now felt like a place of endless possibility. I was no longer a man running from his past. I was a man embracing his future. My heart, once so broken, was now full. The story, which had started with a painful walk away, had come full circle. It was a story of a father and a son, a story of a family, and a story of a woman who had, in her quiet strength, changed everything. It was a story that was just beginning, and I was excited to see what the next chapter would bring, because I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that no matter what, I would never be alone again. The success of our small business, Boston Woodworks, was more than just a financial triumph. It was a testament to our family's renewed unity. Our shared time in the workshop was not just about building furniture. It was about rebuilding trust, brick by brick, plank by plank. The air, once thick with unspoken tension, was now filled with the satisfying scent of pine and the easy rhythm of our collaboration. Michael was thriving. The weight of his pride, once a heavy burden on his shoulders, had been replaced by a quiet confidence. He was a better father, a more patient husband, and a happier man. Clara's joy was a silent, radiant presence in their home. She would look at me and then at Michael, a knowing smile on her face, her eyes filled with a deep, profound gratitude. One afternoon, as we were putting the finishing touches on a custom-built bookshelf, Michael paused and looked at me. "I have an idea, Dad," he said, a new energy in his voice. "A big one." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah, let's hear it." "I want to move the business out of the garage," he said, his voice brimming with excitement. "I want to buy a space, a real workshop, and I want to hire a few people. I want to expand." I was stunned. It was a big leap of faith, a leap that required not just a financial investment, but a deep-seated belief in our future. It was a risk, and for a man who had been so cautious, it was a profound sign of his growth. "That's a big step, son," I said, my voice cautious. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," he said, his eyes shining with a fierce determination. "And I want you to be a part of it, a full partner, not just a silent one." The words were a gift, a profound sign of his trust. He wasn't just offering me a job, he was offering me a place in his life, a place in his future. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "I'd be honored, son. I'd be honored to be your partner." We shook hands, a firm, solid handshake that was a promise of a shared future, of a bond that was stronger than anything that could ever try to break it. The search for a new workshop was a journey in itself. We looked at old warehouses, run-down industrial spaces, and even a few abandoned factories. We were looking for more than just a space. We were looking for a place that felt right, a place that felt like home. We found it in an old abandoned mill on the outskirts of Boston. The building was old, its brick walls weathered and its windows boarded up. But we saw something in it. We saw a history of hard work, a history of craftsmanship, a history of a community built on the sweat and the dreams of men like my father. We saw a future. We bought the mill, and the work began. It was a family affair. Michael and I were the architects of the future, our hands covered in dust and our clothes stained with paint. Clara, with her keen eye for design, helped us lay out the space, creating a place that was not just a workshop, but a gallery, a place where our creations could be displayed and admired. And Leo was our little cheerleader, his small, enthusiastic voice a constant source of joy. As we were cleaning out the mill, I found a small worn piece of wood, a fragment of a larger piece. It was a piece of oak, a wood I had worked with my entire life. I looked at it closely, and I saw a small, faded inscription on the back. It was a quote, a simple, powerful message. A man is only as good as his word, and as strong as the wood he builds with. I looked at it, and a lump formed in my throat. It was my father's motto, a phrase he had lived his life by. The piece of wood, a relic from a past long gone, was a message from the future, a message of hope, of purpose, of a legacy that was being passed down from one generation to the next. I showed it to Michael, and he read the inscription, a look of profound respect on his face. He didn't say anything, he didn't need to. The message was clear. We were not just building a business, we were building a legacy of honesty, integrity, and hard work. The work was long and hard, but it was also a labor of love. We worked side by side, the rhythm of our hammers and saws a familiar, comforting sound. We were a family, and we were building our future, together. And in the middle of it all, I looked at Clara. She was smiling, a genuine, joyful smile that lit up her entire face. She had seen the truth, and she had had the courage to fight for it. She had brought a father back to his son, and in doing so she had become a part of my story, a part of my family, in a way that was more profound than blood or marriage. She was the one who had made my broken heart whole again, and in that quiet, unspoken understanding, I knew that I was the luckiest man in the world. The new workshop, Boston Woodworks Mill, was more than we could have imagined. We had transformed the old abandoned mill into a vibrant, bustling hub of creativity and craftsmanship. The air, once stale and filled with the dust of the past, now smelled of freshly sawn wood and the promise of the future. The floor-to-ceiling windows, once boarded up, now flooded the space with natural light, illuminating our work and our lives. The grand opening was a community event. People from all over Boston came to see our work, to touch the beautiful, timeless pieces that we had crafted with our own hands. Michael, once so closed off and proud, was now a confident, charismatic leader, shaking hands, telling stories, and sharing his passion with a quiet, genuine joy. Clara, in her element, was the face of the business. She greeted people with a warm smile, her eyes sparkling with a quiet pride. She talked about the history of the mill, about our family's legacy, and about the love that was poured into every piece we created. She was more than just a partner. She was the heart and soul of our business. Leo, our little mascot, ran around the workshop, his small, excited voice a constant source of laughter. He would point at a piece of furniture and proudly announce, "My grandpa helped build that." My heart, already full, would swell with a quiet joy. That evening, after the crowds had gone and the quiet had settled over the workshop, the three of us, Michael, Clara, and I, stood in the middle of our creation, surrounded by the work of our hands. "We did it, Dad," Michael said, his voice a low, emotional whisper. "We did it." I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "No, son, we did it. Together." He nodded, a tear welling up in his eye. "I don't know how I can ever thank you enough, for everything, for the money, for the forgiveness. For just being my dad." I put a hand on his shoulder, my voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to thank me, son. Your happiness is all the thanks I need." Clara came and stood beside us, and she took each of our hands, a silent gesture of her love and her pride. "You two," she said, her voice a soft murmur, "are the most stubborn men I have ever met, but you are also the most loving." The words were a gift, a testament to the journey we had all been on. We stood there for a long time, the only sound the quiet hum of the lights and the gentle creak of the floorboards. The air was filled with a sense of accomplishment, a sense of peace, a sense of family. My story, which had started with a broken heart and a painful walk away, had come full circle. It was a story of a father and a son, a story of a family, and a story of a woman who had, in her quiet strength, changed everything. A few months after the grand opening, Michael and Clara surprised me. They had been working on a secret project in the workshop, and they unveiled it on my 63rd birthday. It was a beautiful, custom-built writing desk, made from the same oak that had been a part of my father's mill. It was a masterpiece, a work of art. "This is for you, Dad," Michael said, his voice full of pride. "We built it together. A place for you to tell your story, a place for you to write your next chapter." The desk was more than a gift. It was a symbol of a love that was stronger than pride, stronger than anger, stronger than any misunderstanding. A love that had been tested and had emerged stronger than ever. I ran my hand over the smooth, polished wood, my heart full. The desk was not just a piece of furniture. It was a testament to our journey, a journey that had started with a broken heart and had ended with a family, whole and unbroken. I looked at Michael, at Clara, and at Leo, who was running around the desk, his small, excited voice a constant source of joy. I was the luckiest man in the world. I had lost my family once, but I had gained it back in a way that was more profound and more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. And in that quiet, peaceful room, I knew that my journey was finally complete. Life, in its beautiful, unpredictable way, continued to unfold. The Boston Woodworks Mill became a beacon of our community, a place where people came not just for beautiful furniture, but for the story behind it. We were a family business, and our story of reconciliation and resilience was woven into the fabric of every piece we created. My role in the business evolved. I was no longer just a partner. I was a mentor, a storyteller, a guardian of our legacy. I would sit with customers, my hands resting on a piece of our work, and I would tell them the story of the mill, of my father, of my son, and of a love that was stronger than pride. Michael, now a confident and respected businessman, was a joy to watch. He had grown so much, shedding the anger and the pride that had once defined him. He was a good man, a great father, and a loving husband. I was proud of him, a pride that was deep and profound. Clara and I shared a bond that was unique and precious. We would have lunch in the workshop, her quiet presence a calming balm on my busy days. She would ask for my advice on business decisions, and she would listen to my stories, her eyes filled with a quiet, genuine respect. Our love was a pure and true one, a love of a family. One afternoon, as I was working on a small, intricate carving, Clara walked into the workshop, a small, knowing smile on her face. "I have a surprise for you," she said, her voice a soft murmur. "I think you're going to like it." She led me to a corner of the workshop that had been curtained off. She pulled back the curtain, and there it was. A small, cozy studio with a large drafting table, a collection of woodworking tools, and a beautiful custom-built chair. "It's a design studio," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "A place for you to create, a place for you to work on your own projects." My heart swelled with a profound gratitude. I had been so focused on helping Michael build his future that I had forgotten about my own. "But I'm your partner," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm here to help you." "I know," she said, her voice firm. "But you're also an artist, a craftsman, and you deserve a space of your own, a space where you can create, a space where you can tell your own story." She handed me a set of keys. "We own the space upstairs," she said. "We're building you a small apartment, a place for you to live, a place for you to be close to us, to be close to your family." I was speechless. The love, the profound kindness, the respect that they had for me was overwhelming. They weren't just giving me a studio, they were giving me a home, they were giving me a life. Tears streamed down my face. I looked at Clara, at the beautiful, kind woman who had seen the truth, who had fought for my family, who had, in her quiet strength, changed everything. "I don't know what to say," I said, my voice a choked whisper. She smiled, a small, radiant smile. "You don't have to say anything. Just come home." I took her in my arms, a gesture of profound love and gratitude. She was more than a daughter-in-law. She was a partner in my journey, a quiet force who had, with one phone call and one long, rainy drive, done more to heal my family than I ever could have imagined. I owed her a debt of gratitude that I knew I could never fully repay. A debt that was not about money, but about something far more precious: family. My life, which had once felt like it was winding down, was now beginning again. I was a man of 63, and I was embarking on a new journey. A journey of creativity, a journey of love, a journey of a family that was stronger and more whole than ever before. The chair in my new studio was not just a piece of furniture. It was a symbol, a symbol of a new beginning, a symbol of a family that had been broken and had been made whole again. It was a story that was just beginning, and I was excited to see what the next chapter would bring, because I knew without a shadow of a doubt that no matter what, I would never be alone again. The new apartment above the workshop became my sanctuary. It was a small space, but it was filled with a profound sense of peace. The walls were lined with books, and the windows overlooked the bustling city of Boston, a city that had once felt so isolating and now felt like home. I would wake up every morning to the familiar sounds of the workshop below, the hum of the saws, the rhythmic tapping of the hammers, the low murmur of Michael's voice. It was a symphony of creation, a soundtrack to my new life. My days were a perfect blend of work and family. I would spend my mornings in my studio, working on my own projects, crafting intricate pieces of wood that were born from a place of love and gratitude. I was no longer just a carpenter. I was an artist, a storyteller, a man who was finally, truly in his element. In the afternoons, I would join Michael in the main workshop. We would work side by side, our conversations easy and comfortable, our bond stronger than ever. We would talk about the business, about our family, about our lives. It was a friendship, a partnership, a father-son relationship that was built on a foundation of trust and respect. Clara and Leo were a constant, joyous presence in my life. They would come up to my apartment in the evenings, and we would eat dinner together, a small, happy family huddled around a table that I had crafted with my own hands. We would talk, we would laugh, we would share stories. The silence that had once defined my life was now filled with the beautiful, chaotic rhythm of family. One evening, as we were sitting on my small balcony, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Clara turned to me, her eyes filled with a quiet, serious warmth. "I know what you did for us," she said, her voice a soft murmur. "I know that you walked away not because you gave up on us, but because you loved us so much. You had the courage to let go, to let Michael find his own way, to let him become his own man. And in doing so, you gave him the greatest gift a father can give his son." My heart, already full, swelled with a profound sense of peace. I had been so afraid of a forbidden love, of a betrayal, of a mistake that would tear my family apart. But Clara had seen the truth. She had seen that my love for her was not a betrayal, but a profound respect, a love that was pure and true, a love of a family. "I was so scared, Clara," I said, my voice a low, emotional whisper. "I was so scared that I would lose you both forever." She took my hand, her touch warm and comforting. "You could never lose us. You're our foundation, you're our rock, you're our home." The words were a gift, a testament to a journey that had been long and difficult, but had ended in a place of profound peace and happiness. A few months later, Michael and Clara surprised me again. They had a large, beautiful portrait framed and hung in my studio. It was a picture of the three of us, Michael, Clara, and me, standing in the middle of our workshop, our hands covered in sawdust, our faces a picture of profound joy. "This is our family portrait," Michael said, his voice full of pride. "This is our legacy. This is our story." The portrait was more than a picture. It was a symbol of a love that was stronger than pride, stronger than anger, stronger than any misunderstanding. A love that had been tested and had emerged stronger than ever. I looked at the portrait and a tear slid down my cheek. I had been a man who had walked away, a man who had been a ghost in his son's life. But now, I was a man who was a part of a family, a man who was home. And in that quiet, peaceful room, I knew that my journey was finally complete. The years that followed were a testament to the power of forgiveness, the resilience of a family, and the profound, quiet strength of a woman who had, in her own way, saved us all. The Boston Woodworks Mill flourished, becoming a multi-generational business that was not just about crafting beautiful furniture, but about building a legacy of love and trust. Michael and I were a team, a partnership that was stronger than blood. We would spend our days in the workshop, our conversations easy and comfortable, our shared laughter a constant comforting presence. He was a father, a husband and a son, a man who had finally found his footing and was walking a path of purpose and joy. Clara, in her role as our creative director, was a force to be reckoned with. She was a quiet leader, a woman whose intelligence and creativity were matched only by her profound kindness. She was the heart of our family, the quiet force that held us all together. And Leo. Leo grew up surrounded by the sounds and the smells of the workshop. He was a small, enthusiastic apprentice, his hands eager to learn the craft that had been passed down from his great-grandfather to his grandfather to his father. He was a constant source of joy, a living, breathing testament to a family that had been broken and had been made whole again. One afternoon, as I was sitting in my studio, a small, intricate project in my hands, Michael walked in. He was holding a piece of paper, a large, ornate drawing. It was a blueprint, a design for a new project. "I have an idea, Dad," he said, his voice a low rumble. "A big one." I looked at the drawing, and my eyes widened. It was a design for a beautiful, custom-built table, a family table, but it was not just a table, it was a symbol of our journey, a symbol of our love. "I want to build this for you, Dad," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to build a table that will be a testament to our family, a table where we can all gather, a table where we can tell our stories, a table where our legacy can live on." Tears streamed down my face. The journey, which had started with a painful walk away, had come full circle. I had been a man who had lost his family, a man who had been a ghost in his son's life. But now, I was a man who was a part of a family, a man who was home. And my son, the man who had once told me that he didn't need me, was now building a table for me, a symbol of a love that was stronger than pride, stronger than anger, stronger than any misunderstanding. We built the table together, a labor of love that was a testament to our journey. We worked side by side, our hands covered in sawdust, our conversations easy and comfortable. We talked about the past, about the present, and about the future. We talked about the mistakes we had made and the lessons we had learned. We were not just building a table, we were building a future, together. The table, when it was finished, was a masterpiece. It was a work of art, a symbol of a love that had endured. We placed it in the center of the workshop, and that evening we gathered around it, the 3 generations of our family, Michael, Clara, Leo, and me. As we sat there, sharing a meal, I looked at the faces of my family. I saw the love in Michael's eyes, the quiet strength in Clara's, and the innocent joy in Leo's. I had been a man who had walked away, a man who had been a ghost in his son's life. But now, I was a man who was a part of a family, a man who was home. And in that quiet, peaceful moment, I knew that my journey was finally complete. I had found my way back to my family, and in doing so, I had found my way back to myself. My story, which had started with a painful ending, had found a new, beautiful beginning. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that no matter what, I would never be alone again.